Thank you all for being here. I guess we can skip the part where I talk about why this project and so on and who I am. You are all familiar with what we are doing here. I will just shortly present Zukiswa Wanner, sitting next to me, an author, a publisher, an editor, and a curator. She was born in Sambia. Her father is South African, her mother from Zimbabwe. You grew up mostly in South Africa.
No, I grew up mostly in
Zambia, but then went back with 12, 14?
No, I only went to South Africa when I was like 17.
17, okay. So your Wikipedia says something different. In German, the German. Always better to invite you here and engage a conversation to learn something about it. And it says also that you have studied at the Hawaii Pacific University.
That's actually true.
Very well. And now you're living in South Africa and Kenya, but you travel a lot throughout the African continent and consider yourself a Pan-African activist, art author, and so on.
I try.
That's great. And in 2006 you published your first novel, The Madams, about a middle-class black woman hiring a white maid and what then happens. You've published several more novels. The latest is in front of you, London, Cape Town, Joburg.
Yes.
It was published in 2014, but you have also written children's books, an autobiographical text, Hardly Working, a travel memoir of sorts, in 2018. You give lots of workshops. You're a founder of Read South Africa, which is promoting African literature in South Africa, and you were awarded in 2020 the Goethe Medal for your achievements in intercultural exchange. The reason you are here is that you will be curating, or you are already curating, we have to say, the second part of our exhibition series Litafrika. Second part will be shown in summer 2023. And now the stage or the table is yours. I think you'll be talking for approximately 20 to 30 minutes, and there will be possibilities for questions later on. So enjoy. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Zukiswa Wanner.
Okay. Hello everyone, and thank you for coming through. I take it everybody speaks English, so I don't have to speak German. I can't speak German. Alright, on account of the fact that I'm curating, as I do when I'm publishing and when I'm editing, I always want to start these conversations by reading because I'm primarily a writer. So I don't want people to forget that. How many of you guys speak Xhosa? Nobody? Okay, alright. Hello. So I'm going to read something. This is a couple moving from London to Cape Town with a child. The man self-identifies as a South African, although he was raised in the United Kingdom. And the woman is British and self-identifies as such. But he is carrying, so he goes because he looks at it as returning home, although he is an exiled child. He looks at it as returning home, so when he arrives, when he goes with a South African passport. And this is where it gets interesting. The wife, Jermaine, is, she's white. Immigration clearance was easy as always. I was standing in a different line from Martin, this time on account of Zuko and I using British passports. Martin was using a South African passport this time, unlike the last time I'd been here, and was in the citizens' queue. He should have cleared long before us, but he hadn't. For the son and me, clearance went something like this. Welcome to Cape Town, madam. How long do you plan to stay here? Indefinitely. I will apply for my residency from Home Affairs. Thank you, madam. Enjoy South Africa. And our passports received their entry stamps. Meanwhile, Martin was having quite a heated discussion with the immigration officer on the other side. I didn't know what was being said. I didn't realize then that I was about to be introduced to a South Africa that is not in brochures right there at the airport. A South Africa that Liam had warned me about, but I had chosen to ignore. That I was about to get a South African introduction in black and white. Later on, when I knew isiXhosa, I heard it went something like this. Molo buti, Martin, Ewe, Njani, and then Martin handed over his passport. Immigration officer. Oh, Omali. Martin, yes, Omali. The passport kabani lena buti. Martin, it's mine. Immigration officer. No. What's your passport number? Martin, annoying. What do you mean, what's my passport number? Is there a problem? Immigration officer. I am the one asking questions here. You want to tell me you're Omali Wena, as black as you are. Where are you from? Martin, South Africa. Hey man, I'm tired. I've had a long flight. Immigration officer. So why are you speaking Xhosa with an accent, eh? Where in South Africa are you from? Martin, raising his voice. My family is from the Eastern Cape, okay? Immigration officer. Aye, okay. You can't tell me you're from Emakaya when you're too dark to be closer. At which point, I knocked on the immigration officer's booth from the other side and said in my most posh, everyone in my English neighborhood has a lord, a lady before their name accent. Officer, is there a problem with my husband's passport? Immigration officer. Hello, madam. Can I help you, madam? Jermaine. I said, is there a problem with my husband's passport? Should I call our barrister? Immigration officer. Is this your husband? Stamps passport. Hi, no, madam. No problem at all. Slide passport back to Martin. A mistake, chief. Welcome home. All right. Did you fairly understand that person? That's what I meant, yeah, in conversation. All right. Yeah, so that's about it. Any questions? Oh, I'm also a publisher, so this is one of the books that I published. No questions. Okay, let's go for lunch.
Do you sell them right here, right now?
Well, this one, I actually brought this so that I could put on their bookshelf. Oh. So no, I hadn't thought about selling, but now that you've asked, I shall send some next time.
I would like to know, he told before what is your, you grew up in different countries and parents from different countries, and now you also read this passage with different backgrounds. Is this something that interests you very much in African literature, that to see all these different backgrounds, that they are not all the same? It's always it's a confrontation maybe also.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like identity, I think identity, I can't run away from the idea of identity because I have so many of them. You know, so when I'm in Zimbabwe, it's a little joke that I always tell my cousins. So when I'm in Zimbabwe, I get away with stuff that my Zimbabwean cousins can't get away with, because my Zimbabwean family always says, you know how these South Africans are. And when I'm in South Africa, I get away with stuff that my South African cousins can't get away with. because the elders in the family always say, you know, this one, she grew up in exile, and you know she's half Zimbabwean. And so I'm very much able to like sit with the patriarchs in both countries and drink a bottle of beer, whereas the other girls in the family are expected to be cleaning and cooking. So it works for me. So identity actually really appeals to me, but I think part of the reason also is because the countries that I've stayed in have been immensely generous, so they have allowed me to be part of them enough, but they also, well, they've allowed me to criticize them because they consider that I'm part of them, which is always something that most of the time when you're an outsider, people will say, why are you saying that? Go back to your country. But I don't get that, so I'm lucky in that way. And I think it's part of the reason also that, because Rémi said I should touch on this, it's part of the reason too that I am curating the way that I'm planning to curate. You know, during lockdown, I started a literary festival, virtual literary festival. It was dubbed, you know, the first, you know, pandemic virtual literary festival called Afrolit Frontières. And I did it in the way that a person without a budget does. We did it on Instagram, but obviously it's also very available everywhere now. It's available on YouTube, I think. But the other thing that we did with it, I did it in a way that I'd always wanted to do a literary festival, which is I wanted to have, you know, the three major languages that are spoken in sub-Saharan Africa. So we had it in English, in French, and in Portuguese. For the final Afrolit Frontières, which was in October, we had it in 8 African languages over 8 days, you know. And the reason for that is that was the only Afrolit Frontières I was able to get funding for. And so often, writers who write in African languages don't have the privilege that I do of getting paid for their work. Usually they just wait for their books to become set books for the particular language at schools. So that gave me a lot of joy to be able to like ensure that the writers got paid, you know. And so that was, and so the reason why I did it that way obviously is because identity interests me, and I'm interested in us speaking to each other, you know, on the continent, and of course with the diaspora as well, and that those will say to me, you know, but why don't you write in an African language, you know, and this is something that is often said, and a lot of it has to do with what Ngugi said about writing in an African language and what he has said so many times. And my response to that is you know, 2 ways. One, if we understand that literature is art, you know, we never tell a visual artist, for instance, what colors to use on the palette when they're painting. So why do we tell a writer what language to use when they're writing? Secondly, the point of writing is to communicate, you know. And so when I find myself with a Nigerian, you know, at a literary festival with a Nigerian and a Ghanaian and a Zimbabwean and a Malawian, we're all talking, we're all able to understand each other because we're speaking English, you know. So I look at it as perhaps having been a colonial language that we decolonize in the way that we speak it, you know. And for that reason, I think it's more important to be able to communicate. And because if I say to you, I've talked in my mom's language, you know. You didn't understand what I said, and I haven't communicated anything as such in that way. So it becomes a failure in communication.
So that's a European question that comes all the time.
Oh, it comes all the time, and every time it's brought up when I'm in Europe, I always answer either in Xhosa or Shona, and then I say, "Did you understand that?"
Yeah.
And then they never, of course, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, but it's very interesting to see that in the novel you integrate this Xhosa and you don't translate, because readers will understand the situation and get the sense of what is said.
Absolutely, but I always really think that if you put something in context enough, you know, a person should understand. So, for instance, if you have a child in rural, you know, in rural areas, say in Selima, in Zimbabwe, for instance, and you know, they've grown up, they were born at the local clinic, they've grown up in this particular place, and then they're reading their English text, and it says, you know, and maybe the English text is from a German writer who's written in English, or it's been translated, or whatever it is, and in the book, the text says they were sitting there and they ate, you know, sauerkraut, and they drank, you know, beer or whatever it is, right? If nobody needs to translate for that child what sauerkraut is, because they can understand that it's a food, because it's been communicated properly. So that's the same thing. I always really, and I always say that in my master classes when I'm with students, that if you communicate a message properly, you can play around with language however you want to, you know. Mm-hmm. But I think also my generation of writers, which is another thing that's interesting, my generation of writers has been doing that quite a bit, you know. The older generation wrote like classic English, they wrote classic French, they wrote classic Portuguese, you know. We have got to a point of decolonizing that language where we want to write the way, you know, who are we writing for to start with? So if we're writing for the people that are in Luanda and Lome and Dakar and what you call it, do they understand the classic French that you're writing in, or the classic Portuguese that you're writing in? Chances are no, because they don't talk like that. So you write the way this setting is, you know. You're not writing to try and, I mean, you know, like I always say regarding translation, my first book has just been translated into Portuguese at the moment by publishers. One, they co-published an Angolan and a Mozambican, what you call it. And it really excited me. The reason it excited me is that they understand the context of the story. So if people in Portugal end up picking that text, that's great. But primarily, they understand the context and why, for instance, with the Madams, they know what South Africa is like, what Southern Africa is like regarding racial politics. So the very idea of a black woman having a white domestic worker is something that they would be like, even they would be like, huh? But if you're like in the UK, or you're here and you have a childminder who's white and you're black, it doesn't mean anything. You know, there's no, it's not out of context. But in Africa, you know, despite the fact that majority of our population are African, this is one of the things where people are like, eh? What? Why? You know, type of thing. And so, of course, because I wrote it in 2006, I was curious about playing with those stereotypes about about race and gender, you know, and also even narrative, because up until that point, there was a lot of stuff about how, you know, African stories had to have like this big political picture or something, you know, and you know, politics, of course, isn't everything, but I wanted to, you know, I wanted to talk about the ordinary and the extraordinariness in the ordinary, you know.
Sorry, regarding the language, because you said earlier that when you go to Nigeria, Ghana, everything when you communicate with other writers, you communicate in English. And I heard many times, like, I don't know if it's badly phrased or not, but white people saying that one of the benefits of colonization is actually giving us one language we can unite with and talk with in Africa, for example, like in English. So, what ways do you find as a writer to actually say, hey, this is a language we communicate with, but not in a way that it's a gift of colonization?
Well, you know, listen, you know, in science, I'm going to use science as an example. In science, you know, we know a lot of scientific terms through their Latin words. You know, I think if you can play around with stuff, but nobody is saying, oh, you know, why are we using Latin? We need an English word for it in the UK. It just is, because it makes more sense scientifically to use that term. So I think there is, you know, in all honesty, if I'm going to be writing a book where I'm writing about the insidiousness and the messed upness of the British, I don't want to write it in Shona, I want the British to read it. Yeah. I want them to know when I'm insulting them. It makes sense to me, you know? So that's certain things. And there's certain things like, you know, when I see in text somebody saying, did you hear the smell? You know? I know what they mean, you know? There are certain even phrases like, you know, like when you say, oh, I'm in trouble today, my mother will kill me dead. You know, if you are killed, you're already dead, but the emphasis makes sense in a lot of African languages. You're killed dead. You're going to be in hell of trouble. You're not just being killed, you're being killed dead, you know? So yeah, it's that stuff about language that I think, and you get it, like, I know it's there in Portuguese, and I know it's there in French. I speak a little bit of it, and I read a little bit of it. I read better than I speak it, to be honest, and I know it exists there. So it's always fascinating to me, even when I'm reading like a text from DR Congo, you know, and if you put it as alongside a text from France, it's different stuff. It's different kettle of fish. So the French can't be like, oh yeah, no, Fiston Wanzamjila is using our French. Fiston will be like, nah, you speak bad French, guys. I'm using Congolese French, you know?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had time to go through the exhibition and what kind of inspiration or what feeling you have about it.
Oh, yeah.
This is one question.
Oh,
I have a second one.
Okay.
And when Rémi introduced you, I could understand that you have already a lot of ideas and inspiration for the next year's exhibition. So I'm curious if you can share a little something about what we can expect and looking forward to.
Okay. All right. So my thoughts about the exhibition, which I really enjoyed, by the way, and then I was happy to go to September and I saw the archives that they have, which excited me as well. But my thoughts about the exhibition is it was really nice. I thought it set the tone for this so well, because it's it gave a beautiful history of African history, literary history, you know. And I saw quite a lot of the foremothers, and as I always call them, five fathers. But I thought it was beautiful. There was, of course, in fact, poetry, quite a lot of poetry. So what I'm gonna do is, one, I'm gonna just focus on prose, and two, I'm gonna have, you know, writers from Lusophone, from Francophone, from Anglophone, but most importantly, have German translations for the Zurich audience. But it's although it's prose, one of the things that I have done in the last few years is try to figure out how to interpret literature differently. What I also have in mind is having literature alongside another art form. I won't tell you at this point in time which, because I don't want to give too much away. I want you guys to be able to come and see the exhibition next year. But yeah, you just know it's just going to be literature and other, you know, whatever text I have, it's going to be that and another art form. And yeah, we'll keep it minimal, you know, so that you are able to engage, the audience is able to engage properly with it. But importantly, so that where the books are available and in translation, it can whet your appetite to buy the books. So yeah.
So thank you very much. I think this has been 30 minutes with Zukiswa Wanner. Thanks for being here. Thanks to you.